Welcome, welcome, welcome to a special edition of the 3DownNation podcast. I'm Justin Dunk, joined by the pride of LaSalle, Ontario, two-time St. Thomas of Villanova Catholic Secondary School Athlete of the Year, former NFL tight end turned great analyst on TSN. Who knows what he's going to go on to do? There's some other nuggets, too, that I'm going to throw in here. But proud Canadian Luke Willson, my man, thank you so much for taking some time to hop on the 3Down pod.
Justin, I appreciate that. I appreciate the Villanova shout out there. Pretty proud ex-Villanova Wildcat. And I will say, during those days when I was winning those Athletes of the Year, I remember watching Justin Dunk on the score, ripping around in the OUA playing for Guelph. So I respect it.
Man, I don't know how you remember that stuff. I've just deleted that from my memory. Seems like a whole different lifetime. But a couple other things that I want to add here to your intro. I didn't want it to be too long, wanted to keep the energy up. But you actually signed a minor league contract with the Toronto Blue Jays. And at one point recently, you were trying to get into the Olympic Games. Like, what hasn't Luke Willson tried to do in the world of athletics?
Yeah, the Blue Jay story is a fun one. It's kind of crazy because I was balancing, I was at Rice at the time, and we can go down that rabbit hole. The cycling thing, I got my teeth kicked in. I wasn't really that close. I thought I would be, but it was kind of fun. You know, I lost a bunch of weight compared to my football world and got introduced to something outside of football, which at that point in my life, it's pretty much all I did for the last 15 years prior. So I'm still enjoying it. I still ride my bike a little more recreationally at the moment, but I was also a pretty big hockey kid, but we'll get into that, I'm sure. But I definitely kind of bleed football now and have been for a very long time.
You know your stuff, my man. We were talking about it over text and even chopping it up. That you know your OUA football, you know your OVFL football. I didn't mention Essex Ravens because when I played for the Guelph Bears, I effing hated playing the Ravens because they were so physical. We didn't go against each other, but they're really physical, dude.
Yeah, that's kind of what we're known for down there in Essex, and it's a point of pride. I played one season, but my two older brothers who went to Western played there. And again, Greg is actually now coaching the London Junior Mustangs. I believe it's now the OSFL. When we played, it was OVFL. He's their head coach over there. But Essex has always been kind of a nasty team. You know, the all black come down there, a little rough around the edges. I was fortunate, and you'll appreciate this, where the year I played, future Heck Creighton winner and Vanier Cup champ Kyle Quinlan was our QB. Yeah. So, and we had another guy who was a stud wideout, Brad Foscisato, who I also believe was on that McMaster team. Both my brothers one was a left tackle, one was a running back. So we were pretty nasty. Sam Mallion was also a quarterback on that team who started for the Windsor Lancers for a while. Like we had some talent on that Essex team. I would say it was a pretty fun summer.
And one of the guys on that Essex team was you, went on to win a Super Bowl with the Seattle Seahawks, had a long career in the National Football League. But I wanted to have you on the 3DownNation podcast. And for the uninitiated that don't know, Luke Willson was actually drafted by the Toronto Argonauts. So make sure that you understand this guy knows his Canadian football. Okay. But you started 2025 off, Luke, by saying that it should be the year of the CFL in Canada. Can you explain?
I can. And again, it was funny because I appreciate you bringing up some Canadian ties there. And one guy, I got to go back to the Ravens real quick, was we also had Mike Atkinson playing D tackle, who ended up going to Boise State and balling out there. That Ravens team was loaded. That was a fun trip down memory lane.
Jesus.
But, you know, there's a few things here I need to be very clear, but I have always loved Canadian football. You know, I did not play in the CIS or U Sport now, whatever it's called. I went down to Rice, but I have two brothers that played. My dad back in the day played at the University of Windsor. You know, I was drafted by the Argos, which you can get into that story. You know, football has given me a lot, and I'm born and raised in the Windsor area. You said LaSalle. Didn't go to an American high school. Didn't go to any prep schools. Glenn Mills, the coach of the Essex Ravens, cut all my film on CDs or DVDs back in the day. We talked about this off camera, but I was at an all-Canada gridiron camp, which is where I first saw Rice. Rice first saw me. So I would like nothing more for football to continue to grow in the country of Canada. And I just want to be very, very clear about that, Justin. And then the next thing I'll say to kind of answer your question, why I put that tweet out there is I sit here and I, as you mentioned, I've kind of transitioned to being at TSN. And I've been there 3 years. I am not a veteran of TSN. I do not have a pulse on what's going on and all across Canada right now. But you start to get a general vibe, of how things are rolling. And I look at hockey, which has dominated Canada since the dawn of time. I played hockey, and it's a great sport. But I sit here and I hear parents and I hear stories, and they're horror stories. Okay, this guy, especially in the Toronto area, I'm hearing stories about AAA teams that are $15,000 and you got to do this and do that. And there's people from other countries buying teams to be the general manager and then recruiting players. Like, we're out of control. And then I turn on the television and it's not a physical game anymore. I don't give a damn what anybody says. It's just not. And I grew up watching, I was a Leaf fan, okay, so I'm sure people will be mad at me for that outside of Toronto. Like, I remember the Darcy Tucker days, Ty Domi, Gary Roberts, and it was sick, and it was fun, and it was a really cool product. And I don't feel like, and I'm sure you can push back, that the NHL is the same product it once was. So I sit here now and I say, well, at the network, at TSN, everything that I hear is that football is killing it, They obviously, I just do the NFL there, but the NFL ratings are through the roof. That's everything I hear. Again, Justin, if you hear differently, you can let me know. But the NFL
You're right,
ratings,
man.
okay, everybody's watching it. It's very fun. I think partially too, again, there's a lot of branding, marketing, but I think the on-field product of the NFL is very, very good right now. There's issues. I'm sure we'll get into this. I know a lot of people hate the kickoffs, but the games really matter. When you only play 17 games and it's as competitive as the NFL is, every single game matters. And you can feel that through the TV. On most games, is every game. It's funny because during this tweet, people will be like, did you watch the Thursday nighter, Seahawks versus Bears? And I'm like, okay, we can cherry pick if you want. And I'll gladly cherry pick games that were not the Thursday nighter, Seahawks versus Bears. But most of the time, it's a very entertaining product. So I sit here and I say to myself, as far as 2025, Canada, hockey is on a decline. At the youth level, it's an absolute mess. It's the most political sport in the country. Football, obviously there's politics and everything, but at the youth level, at least in Ontario, it is not as political as hockey. That is a fact. Okay? It is definitely less expensive to play. Generally speaking, I'm going to go with the OSFL teams. You don't really need much, pair of cleats, team's going to provide footballs, team's going to provide shoulder pads. There's obviously a registration fee. Sure, every team is a little different there. But it's like you come out here, you play ball. I also believe in the camaraderie of football. I really do. I think it's a game that beyond you need to be a super athlete if you want to be great at it. But it teaches you a lot of life lessons. And then the next thing I'll say is it's fun and it's enjoyable to watch. So when I say it's the year of the CFL, and it wasn't a shot like the CFL, and they have this narrative, we can get into this. The CFL is a peewee league or a little league. I have never thought that the CFL is a little league. But I do think it can grow a lot bigger than it is now. I do think that the ratings can continue to trend. I think that you can transform a lot of people that, watch hockey or watch basketball, and you're like, yeah, game 22 of the basketball season doesn't seem to have the intensity of a football game in the CFL. And I think that there's a great opportunity for that league to grow. So that's kind of why I put that tweet out there where I'm like, the time is now from a grassroots level to a can-you sport level to CFL. I think it's a great thing that the NFL is growing. I think that should help the CFL. And I think the time right now is to start really pressing into trying to continue to grow our game so that it kind of is up there as far as ideas with hockey. And it's going to take some time, but that's kind of where the tweet came from.
I like it, man. And you're on point with a lot of these things. There's never been more Canadians playing football in the NFL and prominent roles on that. Chuba Hubbard, starting running back. Chase Brown, starting running back. That's all due respect to the many linemen that have come through the NFL. But same goes for the CFL. You've never had more Canadians playing in what they call the skill positions. This past season, Luke, I'm sure you probably already know this, but it was the first time in CFL history where the leading rusher in the league and the leading receiver from a yardage standpoint were both Canadian. Brady Oliveira with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, Justin McInnes with the BC Lions. There have never been more Canadians playing NCAA football and getting those opportunities. And I would say that there's never been more Canadians getting NFL looks coming out of U Sports football, CIAU, whatever you want to call it, CIS in my day, than ever before. Legitimate look. So I think you're on point with this wave of football in our country and that the CFL can capitalize on its uptick. And as for the ratings, the CFL has had a couple of good years back to back with television ratings. And if you kind of look at it on a scale, right, you have your Saturday night hockey night in Canada is your prime time sort of golden television ticket. It gets over 1 million viewers on average, depending how the Leafs are going and the opponent can kind of vary. But let's say it's between 1 and 2 million. Other than that, in hockey, the CFL is going to beat all of those regional broadcasts. And
For sure.
you look at basketball, and you mentioned this too, Luke, like the CFL crushes the Toronto Raptors ratings, every year, except for some, and I say some of the games during the Raptors playoff run. So the CFL, in terms of television ratings in our country, is right there with almost anything else. That said, the NFL is showing, especially those primetime games, that there is a lot of interest, well over 1 million viewers, as you well know, for those primetime games, the playoff games and the Super Bowl, much more.
Yeah, so I think, with those numbers, and again, that's a legitimate thing, everything you just said. There's the toughest part for the CFL right now is to shake this, I don't know how many year narrative that the league has. And that's where, for me, it gets a bit strange because what I find is that and what I've found the hard way, there's a lot of fans, and it's funny, but I talked to a few members at TSN, and they refer to these things as like sacred cows. Like there's a lot of people in the CFL that believe, hey, this is the best football. We don't need to change. We don't want to do anything to adjust. We're better than the NFL, yada, yada, yada. And the only people who are going to suffer with that mentality is the players. Because at the end of the day, and this is part of my point, and we can get into the whole like reduced punts, which was funny. I went from saying like minimize the amount of punts into which I was then told the average punts I'd be minimizing by 1.26 to like this guy wants to eliminate punts. And I'm like, on no point did I say we need to eliminate punts. Okay. But I look at it and it's like, okay, how can we get more eyes on the game and shake this narrative? If the product is as good as you and me think, and the players are as good, and it is the second best league talent-wise in the world, okay, why is it that you turn on the national championship last night, and obviously it's different because there's more fans, it's the national title game, et cetera, but even some of the college playoffs, it's like people are gambling, like my buddy's group chat's going off of what's going on. How do we get that into a CFL game? How does that become the Grey Cup? And to me, it means there's got to be more eyes on the game, and there's got to be a change of the narrative. So again, the ratings are trending in the right direction, so let's keep that going. But how do we get a younger fan base more interested in this game? And I think that there's got to be some give and take here. And I would love to hear your rules and thoughts on what I was saying. But if you want to get into the second part of that tweet, which is and I'm a big believer in this. There's a lot of people, Justin, that have been like, change the branding. Okay, sure. That could help, could not help. That's not my forte. But what I would say is that product is king. At the end of the day, we can brand whatever. But if the product itself is unbelievable, people will watch. And my point in one of those things was you could feel, how intense some of these games are. When I watch NFL games, and it's not every game, but it's enough of them. It's the majority where you've got guys out there that are playing on non-guaranteed contracts. And I'm not saying that's good for the players, but it's certainly, week 18, if your team's knocked out and you are playing for a non-guaranteed contract, you're going to free agency, you're going hard. You're getting after it. You got coaches that are moving around like crazy. You got a lot of things, I guess is my point, playing into those games that aren't even playoff wise. And the CFL has those things. But again, the narrative around it is that it's not a legitimate league, or I shouldn't say legitimate. It's a minor league. The talent isn't good. How do we change that? So you mentioned Brady O. I sit here and say, listen, if you're in Winnipeg and you're out of punts at the end of the game and it's 3rd and 3 and you're down 4, whatever, and there's 6 minutes left. So it's a punting situation. Maybe you pin him deep, play the field possession game, yada, yada, yada. Or all of a sudden now you got a huge 3rd down with Colros and Brady O, and the coach has got to scheme it up. Like, that to me is more electric. And I'll shout out, I think it might have been your guy, JC, that was like the average punt return's 11 yards. Then an 11-yard punt return. That's what you're going to get on average, 11-yard punt return. It's not that exciting. Yes, you still have 10 of them, and can you break a punt return? Sure. But to me, and I think to a lot of younger generations, I would rather see the best football players, which again, Brady's probably one of them. Would you agree? Zach Colros is probably another one. I would rather see those guys in crunch time. I'll go right back to the Bills-Ravens game. I'm on TSN. What is the first thing everybody asks me about that game? Lamar Jackson, the playoffs. Guy's the most athletic dude in the NFL. Didn't have a great first half. Everybody wants to know, how does that happen? Very rarely does anyone want to know how the punt happened. And that's where I'm like, hey, I want to see the best guys play. I want to see the best football players play. And, I'm a big Adam Big Hill fan. I know I'm sticking with Winnipeg right now. But it's like if the roles are reversed here and they're playing the Argos, I want to see Chad Kelly check a play at the line and Adam Big Hill play the chess matchup and be like, well, we're going to get out of whatever front or whatever coverage you're in right now. And then I'd like to see somebody come in afterwards and take that play on TSN and be like, let me tell you what I think happened. I think that they were lined up in, this sort of pressure look. Chad Kelly caught it, said this, pushed the protection over, and Big Hill said, you want to play chess? I can play chess too. Bam, we're getting out of this. We're now in a full zone. The clock's running down. We got operation issues. It's electric to me. That to me is like the next level of football where I think, again, the more you have your best players on the field, the better the product is, the easier it is to brand. That's where I'm coming from with that whole punting thing. Is that fair?
It definitely is, man. And, it makes me think back to the good old days in the Canadian Football League. What did people like about it? The shootouts, quarterbacks regularly passing for 5,000, 6,000 yards in a season, 50 touchdown passes in a season. It's ultra rare in the NFL, and yes, it has happened before, but it was more often happening in the CFL. And from my perspective, Luke, and talking to people on both sides of the border, you look at the NFL and its scoring, and the proof is in the numbers here, and they have come a long way in terms of opening up the game, where I would argue the CFL has gone the other way. So people used to be proud about 3-down football in our pro league here in the CFL because the NFL would take from it here and there, but they've taken a bunch from it, yet the CFL hasn't innovated, I think, to your point, as much as they used to. It's become more conservative. And I also do think that, to be fair to the Canadian Football League, there has been a shift in the type of athlete, and you mentioned one, Lamar Jackson, that now gets a legitimate shot in the NFL at the quarterback position that did not used to for a multitude of reasons, right? Like you talk to CFL coaches and talent evaluators, and they'll tell you, not too long ago, 10, 15, 20 years ago, Lamar Jackson would be in the CFL. Part of that, you could argue, could have been the color of his skin. But the other part of that was because, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, in the NFL, it was a prototypical quarterback. You wanted a big guy to stand in there and deliver the football. But that's changed. So credit the NFL for seeing that. So to your point about this punt idea or whatever else it is, the CFL needs to think about how to innovate and again have the NFL stealing their ideas, because I think that would benefit the CFL to try to push this ball down the field, so to speak, push the idea that you're talking about to make the product the best that it can be. And the other thing that I think, Luke, here while I'm thinking about it is I think the players need to be marketed better. Like, I want you to give me some examples from your time in the NFL, but you don't see Canadian Football League players marketed across national television in Canada. Yet we see in between every NFL game on TSN, whether this is NFL Canada, TSN, or both of them in a collaboration, a quick hit about Chuba Hubbard, right? I'm watching it with my young nephews. Now they know the names of Chuba Hubbard and Chase Brown and Josh Palmer and Benjamin St. Just, who's playing with the Washington Commanders, because they see these little quick hits during the commercials. You don't see that in the Canadian Football League. They had one commercial last year that was called Keep It Unreal that ran on repeat. But you need to have people connect to the players. And the players, I would argue, have never been able to put out a better product with all the things out there now that you can do in training and your diet and mental training as well. Like, this is where I think the CFL is losing and needs to invest some money into it. I'm not saying they have the kind of money that the NFL does, but you have to put your players out there.
So it's funny you said, I would highly agree. And I think you could go even, like you mentioned that you said your nephew was watching the commercials. I remember being a kid, and I tell this story all the time. And I was a big Lions fan growing up from Windsor. And somewhere I had saw that Nate Burleson was Canadian. And I'm like, holy smokes, like he was playing on the Lions at the time. And I remember like firing up my parents' desktop and like being like, where in Canada is this guy from? And I remember reading like the Wikipedia page, and I have met Nate. He's pretty tied in the Seattle community, I believe, grew up around there. Phenomenal dude. And he's very proud of his Canadian heritage, but not really your prototypical Canadian story. Went to high school, I believe, in Washington State. Very minimal ties to like how a Canadian in any part of the country grew up. Like, it's a very big difference between playing football in the U.S. in high school and here. So I think to further that point is, when you've got guys, and I believe Chuba is one of them. I think he's from Sherwood Park, Alberta. And it's like, to tell that side of the story where it's like, yo, this kid is from here, went to high school here, like played in the local levels here. And that would be another thing. Yes, where it's like, even for CFL guys to go into, we talked about the OVFL, the OSFL, things like that. Bring guys back or bring teams in. And obviously it's harder, and say, hey, this guy played for the Essex Ravens. This guy played for the Durham Dolphins back in the day. This guy played for the Guelph Bears. And now he's, here's his career. Like, highlight these guys so that at a young level, when you're 14, be like, hey, these guys they become larger than life. Like, it's funny when you look back on it. But again, I told you I was a bit of a hockey kid. I was in 8th grade, and the captain of the Windsor Spitfires came by my elementary school. And I remember thinking at that time, like, this is unbelievable. Like, this is my dream one day, and to sit there now and be like, Jesus, like, I was that infatuated over an OHL dude is, it's funny, but in the same breath, like, it goes to show you how little it takes to like make an impression on a kid. And I think, just a commercial like that, be like, wait, like, these are guys I can look up and draw parallels to being like, hey, this guy played in the OSFL. This guy played here. I'm doing the same thing. Maybe it's 3 towns over, but I'm doing the same thing. And that means that I've got a shot. And I think it's a wildly important thing. And again, I don't know a ton about the branding side of who decides what, but that is another great point where it's like, the more you can get these guys out there, the better this thing will be for everyone. And Justin, if you don't mind, I'm going to quick pivot. You mentioned like the product, and it was funny because one of the things I said in that tweet too was the rules on like being in the building. And we have rules in the NFL as well. They're In season, they're pretty lenient. Like padded practices are strict, but as far as like being hours, I don't ever remember that. In off season, there is some rules that were strictly enforced. But what I would say is that most guys, in my opinion, this is going to be a bit of a hot take, but in my opinion, real ball players in season want to be in the building. So it's this weird rule where it's like, hey, the guys don't want to be here, and you can't keep them there all day. And it's like, and I'm going to give some love here to Saskatchewan Roughriders. The Saskatchewan Roughriders facility looks sick. From what I've been told, I never played for the Saskatchewan. Can you verify that?
It's
Again, I've seen
unbelievable,
photos.
man. Yes. Oh
Unbelievable.
my God, dude. I've been in there. I was
So it's
covering
like,
the team last year, the weight
yes.
room, the meeting rooms, everything. And just for your own knowledge here, Luke, so you continue, the CFL sort of work day is 4.5 hours.
Okay. So to me, that is absolutely insane. And I got to be honest, like I like the CFL. It doesn't mean I can't critique it. I know that there's some union stuff. What are you going to do at a pro level for 4.5 hours? And this is where I'm coming from when you're like, you're doing a disservice to the guys, because I sit here and I look at us, and I say us back in the NFL. In season, this is how your general week is going to work. We'll start on Wednesday. Wednesday, I'm getting in there, and we would have big guys and big skill lift at 7 a.m. So 7 a.m. to 7:30, 7:45, you're in and out of there pretty quick. It's not a huge bloodbath lift. And then we've got a 15-minute window to breakfast is also at the facility. So guys pick and choose if you don't have special teams or if you do. I was always in the special teams meeting. We start at 8 o'clock. 8 a.m. to 8:45. If it's Wednesday, we're doing punt and punt return usually. And that, again, this could vary from team to team. I'm going down my Seattle schedule. So we've got the PowerPoint up. We're going through what we're doing. Punt, obviously, we're blocking, but we're looking at their rushes, their personnel, guys, things they like to do, et cetera, et cetera. Punt and return, if we're sending an exotic block, that sort of thing, and you go matchups. Hey, you're holding up this guy. You're holding up this guy. Bam, bam, bam. You go through that. 8:45, Pete Carroll's walking in the room. Full team meeting. That's going 30 minutes. And now that could get a little fun. It can get a little serious. It can be anywhere in between. Okay. So again, it's been 7 o'clock and we're at 9:30, 2.5 hours, and I haven't even touched offensive football yet. Bam. And nor practice, nor walkthrough. 9:30 to about 10, we're doing run install. It's Wednesday, so it's base downs. First and second downs only. We're not touching third downs. We're not touching red zone. Those are for days later in the week. Okay. The O-line will bounce. The tight ends, running backs will probably bounce as well, depending on if we're using them a ton in the pass game. But tight ends and receivers are in there now at the QB. We're doing 30 minutes of pass install. This is on a weekly basis. So now we've gone, if my math is right, Pete ended at 9:15. We were at 9:45. It's now 10:15. You now break off into a tight end meeting. And if you have to rerun, it kind of depends on the part of the year. But if you have to rerun anything that's new or go over the details, or if guys got questions, now you go right to your tight end coach. You're in a very small meeting room. If not, we're watching film. Hey, we're watching film on the other team. Bam, bam, bam. We got a nice 30-minute window there. 11 o'clock, we're on the field for a walkthrough. I say walkthrough, it was more like a sprint jog through. You know what I'm saying? Every day we do the install. We'll have a run period, a pass period. And then Pete loved 2-minute and situational football. So every day we'll do ones-on-ones, some sort of situational ball. Generally, a guy named Carl Smith, they used to call him Tater, would come in, older guy, been in the league forever. Hey, today's situation, we've got a 7-point lead, and it's 4 minutes. A lot of it was 2 minutes. Let's say we're down 6. We're down 6 at the end of the half, or we're down 6 at the end of the game. So that changes whether we're going once we get in field goal range, whether it's fourth down, how to use timeouts. And he would put the coaches in the spot. We got 1 timeout this time. We got 2 timeouts. These are the things you're doing. It's noon. And again, I got there at 7, Justin. It's noon, and we have not practiced yet. Now we've done a walkthrough. We then go eat lunch. 1 o'clock to 3, you're on the field. Okay, so now it's practice, and it's a very, very fast, very intense, very focused practice. 3 to 3:30, you're showering up. You're getting in the tubs if you want. You're watching film from 3:30 to 4:30, usually 5, and then potentially have players' meetings. And then potentially, if you wanted to after that, you're going home with an iPad, or you're in the building. We had a pool, we had a hot tub, cold tub, Epsom salt baths, 15 trainers. You get my point. You're there from 7 to 5 every day. So let me phrase that. Every work day, that's Wednesday, Thursday. Friday got a little weird in Seattle because of where we're located. If we were flying to the East Coast, we would practice half day and then bounce over on the plane. So if we're playing Philly, we're leaving Friday. So my point here with this stuff is, again, I talk product and I say, hey, why are the guys only in the building for 4.5 hours? How are we going over all the details? This is pro ball. And then the response that I got from a lot of the people on Twitter, which I got to remember that Twitter is not the voice of everybody, is now like, oh, well, the players, it's the players, it's the players. Well, I would pose this question to you. If you're a young guy that's trying to make it in the NFL, and that is your dream, and I do believe talent-wise, the top 10 guys on a CFL roster are probably interchangeable to some degree with the bottom 10 on an NFL roster. And guys can argue that, oh, it's more, it's less. You get the point. But let's say you just didn't get the situation, the fit, or whatever, which is a real thing in all levels of football. And you go in and you're like, okay, I'm going to play for, the BC Lions. All right. And then the guy who's the exact same amount of talent as you are is playing for the Seattle Seahawks on their practice squad, or is their, of the 53-man roster is number 49. So my point now is all of a sudden that guy who's on the P squad is going 7 to 10 hours a day in the facility, is watching film to a crazy amount, has all sorts of, opportunities laid out for him, is going up theoretically against more talented competition. And now all of a sudden the guy who's in BC, and I don't want to drag the Lions, but based on that report card I saw, and a couple, and again, I do ask around, I'm hearing rumors that the Lions are lifting weights in an old squash court. Okay, I don't know if you've been to that facility, but it ain't the Saskatchewan Roughriders. So you're living in Surrey. Yeah, okay. You're living in Surrey. It's an absolute bloodbath. You're not supported by the team. And I've heard that the new owner's changing that. This isn't a shot at him, obviously. This is a shot at the past. What happens in 3 years? You got a 23-year-old kid who's now 26. He's been in the Seahawks organization versus you got a 23-year-old kid who's been in BC, and there are similar talent levels. You tell me who the better football player is. I think it's a pretty easy answer. And then you tell me who's going to put a better product on the field. And then these CFL guys want to stomp their feet and be like, man, I hate when people think that our league's minor leagues. Well, you act minor leagues in a lot of ways. And it's a shame because the guys who suffer are then the players. And it's unfortunate to me, and I'm going on this rant right now, why the fans don't want to be able to amend or be amicable to changes. Even if it brings new eyes, new ownership, new money to the game, and it devalues a bit of the product during the learning curve. Like I look at the NFL kickoff. Has that looked good? No. It's looked terrible. Has it stopped anyone from watching, Justin? I don't think so.
More people
and they'll
are
probably
watching,
change it. Yes. But that's kind of where I'm at with this whole, if we want the CFL to take that next step, I think it's an all hands on deck. I think it's CFL. I think it's TSN. And I think it's a CFLPA. And I also think it's youth football. I think the OUA, and again, Can U Sport, it's not going to be what it should be if there isn't some sort of governing body or meeting or, meeting of the minds where everybody gets on board to try and grow the game from a narrative perspective. End of rant on that.
That was awesome. We should balance it a little bit by saying that just because the CFL workday is 4.5 hours doesn't mean all the guys are looking at their watch and leaving the facility. And you mentioned Zach Collaros earlier, the quarterbacks are in there grinding it out. And you'll hear the veterans talk about, Luke, and I'm sure you can speak to this even better than I can, but being a pro and what it takes. And you can see how that is different among the quarterbacks who have success in this league. But then you can also see that among the rookie guys who jump in and have success right away. One example that jumps to mind is Ontario Wilson, who was a receiver, young rookie with the Blue Bombers, clearly earned the respect of Collaros. And now he's subsequently had a great year with Winnipeg as a rookie, which is rare. Collaros doesn't usually like taking those kind of guys under his wing because they got to earn his trust. But now he's signed an NFL contract with the New York Jets. So there are guys that put in more time. But to your point, if it's mandated, everybody's going to be doing that, not just the guys who decide to do it on their own.
And Justin, what I would say to reiterate what you said is that most ball players that care about it will be there either way. They'll be there either way. But what's tough is it's like, hey, let's say it's an offensive line. Let's say the 5 offensive linemen are doing film on their own. And one guy is like, nah, buddy, I'm going to go smoke a joint and leave. And I'm not saying smoking a joint is a bad thing, but it's like, dude, I'm here to collect a check, play a little bit of ball, smoke some weed. It's like, okay, now you come to game day and it's a tight CFL game and we're making a Ringo call or we're sliding this way or we, at the line. Again, I don't know everybody's team, but like when I was playing in Baltimore and Greg Roman was the OC for that short time I was there, it was like, man, Lamar would get in the huddle and he'd be like, yo, we're going here. Yes, no. So if we yesed it, the play called was on. If he knowed it, we had to flip the play. And as a tight end, I would potentially have to motion myself. And then he'd also can it, which I know everybody kind of knows now. And you hear a quarterback yell, can, means he threw the play in the can and he's got a second play called. So in the huddle. So he'll call 2 plays and the first one will be a run where you can flip. So again, if we're trying to get to that level of execution and your guard isn't going to the players only meeting because he's not a real ball player, and I say real ball player, you get what I'm saying. He jams up the other 4 guys because he's not exactly sure what he's doing on game day. And if he figures it out, he's probably a step slower than what he should be. That millisecond, and then he doesn't win his rep or doesn't dominate his rep. And the next thing you know, it's a whole ordeal. And instead of getting 6 yards, we get 2, yada, yada, yada. You get where I'm coming from. So I'll say, like, you mentioned Zach, and I don't know him, but I've heard nothing but great things about this guy from a lot of people. But like, he's a guy who's most likely in the building. He's not a 4.5-hour guy. And that would be my kind of gripe where it's like, again, the real ball players will still want to be in there because they like ball. They like playing ball. And I think that's another way where the CFL can grow their on-field product is by like coming to some sort of agreement in that sense.
And you mentioned in your rant there, grassroots and everybody working together in this country, which doesn't happen, excuse me, right now. Something as simple as, let's say, flag football in this country. CFL wanted money to put their logos on the flags, but then I got my nephews going out here and all the teams in the flag league are NFL. Because the CFL, who doesn't make anywhere near the kind of money the NFL does, wants money, but they can't see the forest for the trees, so to speak, the growth opportunity down the line to just, allow Football Canada or whoever it is to put their CFL logo or some of the team logos on the flags. And it's NFL territory now. And the NFL has marketing territory up here. So these are the kind of battles that are out there and are real that the CFL needs to understand. To your point about the Spitfires captain coming to your school, there are a lot of CFL athletes who are in the communities, but there are these other items that the CFL needs to start getting right. Somebody told me from a business perspective is like, you got to make your tap-ins on the golf course to get anywhere chance to close to making par, right? You got to make your tap-ins in business. You got to make your tap-ins as a pro athlete, like the easy stuff you have to do, right? What are you going to eat for health? A bag of chips or an apple? It's simple. You don't have to get a college degree to understand that. And I think that's where the CFL's at with some of this stuff is like, yeah, we're not going to get a lot of money up front. And I realize the CFL doesn't have a whole lot of money to invest in these things either, but allowing a flag league across our country or flag leagues across the country to have CFL logos, and I'm not saying all of them are in the NFL, but from what I understand, the majority are. That is simple to me. That's a tap-in. Something as simple as, Luke, like NFL Canada is going to events like the Vanier Cup and OUA games, from what I've heard, and setting up there, having live activations, people throwing the ball through a hole or whatever it is. Where's the CFL? Like, this is easy stuff that doesn't cost a lot of money that the CFL needs to understand. And you were talking about it off camera, but I'll bring it on camera in terms of the average age of viewership and even ticket buyers in the CFL compared to the NFL. I think the CFL has lost a generation here. And I understand you have to adhere to your P&L sheet at some point, but they're kind of nickel and dime in here. And I think that's lost a generation of fans. Like even in Saskatchewan, okay, I've been there for one season, pre and post game host. They do a 3-hour pregame show, Luke, on the radio. We've turned it into video, and the people love it there. 3 hours. And then you have the game, and then after, people want to call in for their drives home, which go well longer than the 2 to 3 hours that we stay on the air afterwards. Like, these people love it. But you talk to the kids there in Saskatchewan, and I was surprised, but a number of them, their favorite player currently playing professional football will be an NFL player. It's not a rider. Like, that surprised me. There were some kids that said riders, but the majority said NFL players. And I said, if this is your hottest market or one of the hottest markets, because Winnipeg's going to put their hand up and saying that they're the model franchise, which they are right now. But if in one of your hottest markets you have kids who are saying NFL players are their favorite player, like Christian McCaffrey over AJ Ouellette, that should tell you something, that you need to put a little bit more into it. And I think it even goes to your point, about the players and staying around longer, having everybody in the building. Like, everybody needs to grab onto this and do their part to help make 2025 the year of the CFL and even longer.
I agree. And it's funny you say that, because I hear like the Saskatchewan thing, and it's like, to me, you said the tap-ins, like everything you just said pretty much articulates kind of how I feel about the CFL. And I know that there's a money thing. I understand that. And I'm going to brag on my brother a little bit, but he's coaching an under 18 OSFL team right now. They played the Durham Dolphins in the OVFL or OSFL championship. Why is that game not at BMO Field? Why are the Argos not like all over that? And again, I'm sure they're going to say, oh, it's money, yada, yada, yada. And I look at that and I say, okay, I believe Durham had a quarterback that's at Western and was very, very highly recruited. I know London because I was the offensive assistant. I was crunching a lot of film this summer of 18-year-olds, just put it that way. I know London has a lot of players that are going to play CIS football and potentially NCAA. I've seen them numerous times on film. So it's like, okay, you got, and I'm sure Durham does too. I just remember the quarterback because that was kind of the big emphasis going into that game. But it's like, okay, I look at that and I'm like, they play 3-down ball. It's Canadian rules. These kids are, majority of them, these are the two best teams in the province. They're going to Ontario schools. Some of them are very highly recruited. Like, these are the kids we eventually want in the CFL. Tour the Argos locker room. Mickey Donovan, who's, I believe, the special teams coordinator, is one of the best dudes in football. Okay? Get Mickey Donovan to stop by, talk to the boys. You get for both teams. Hey, this guy's an Argos coach. He's been there, done that. Was a big recruiting guy at Western for a while. Probably one of the most plugged guys in the country. Like, even from a parent standpoint, be like, wow, like, this league has ties to the CFL. Like, they're out here, they give a shit about it. I understand we won't fill BMO Stadium, but I played a hockey game at Joe Louis Arena when I was a kid. We didn't fill that. There was probably 12 parents in the stands. I remember it to this day, playing at that field. And it's like that, and it sounds like Saskatchewan's doing it right, but these are the small things where it's like, hey, you remember that and you look up to these guys, and to me, there's just so many little things that I am agreeing with you, and you can even bring that and keep pushing it, that Saskatchewan's probably doing and Winnipeg's doing, and the answer around here is like, oh, no one in Toronto cares. Well, it's like, one, I would disagree with that, but two, it's like, well, what is Saskatchewan doing that Toronto's not? Like, oh, Toronto's got the Raptors and the Leafs. So what? Like, this is the biggest city around, I think there's still football fans in Toronto that probably, especially at a price point too, would be like, man, this is a really cool atmosphere and I want to go to an Argos game because it's fun. It's way more affordable. There's way more contact. I still believe that people like contact. I know that's the non-narrative these days, but, I like going and watching. So I'm going to go spend my money going to an Argos game. And it's yeah, but I agree with everything you said there, where it's like the more you can push players, stars, create narratives like that, the better. And like, one of the things I wanted to ask you about was the combine. I look at the CFL combine and the draft, and I think to myself, what an unbelievable joke. And, of course, I put that on Twitter, and someone's like, oh, you don't want the kids to be able to forfeit their scholarships? And, like, there's a give and take here. First off, I don't really think there's huge amounts of scholarship money on the table here in Canada. But secondly, it's like, and this is a true story, Justin. You know this guy. I went down, it would have been January. I went down to Lakewood Ranch, Florida, trained with Mike Goff at Athletic Edge, who's a former Scarborough, Ontario native, and a big CFL guy, big CFL E-Camp guy. I believe ran that with Dwayne Ford for years.
Yep,
And
that's
this
how
man
the
got me.
invitational or regional combine started, is because Goff and
Yes.
Ford got together, and then the CFL started doing it. So to their credit, the CFL picked up that idea instead of just having the national. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, love that. So Goff we trained hard. And I remember getting down for my pro day, and this is not a boost. I'm in my 40, like in my 40 stance, and I had my head down, and you got a couple minutes, like not minutes, a couple seconds to gather your thoughts. I remember thinking, how fast I run this next 40 yards is going to determine all of the dreams that I've had since I was a child. I wasn't nervous because at that point I had ran so many 40-yard sprints with Mike in Lakewood Ranch that it was like walking for me. Like we had just drilled it. And I'm like, man, I'm going to blow this out of blow this out of the water. Okay.
You're good.
And dude, ripped it up. Vance McDonald was also a tight end at Rice. He was a second-round pick. I ended up being a fifth round. So we had a lot of scouts there. For all the college fans back there, Sam McGuffey, who was a YouTube sensation, went to Michigan and transferred to Rice. So he was also at this pro day. So we had some, like, the boys were out. The scouts were out there. Let's put it that way. Okay? And I run it, and some scout goes, there's no way you can do that again. And I remember being like, watch me. Boom. Walk back. A couple other guys go. Rip another one. Okay. And he says, he had a bit of a southern twang, goes, son, you just made yourself a lot of money. And I was like, again, you're over the moon. And it was like after that day, I'm like, I'm getting picked. I had a big pro day.
Do you remember what you ran?
Well, there's a debate about this, but on NFL.com, they averaged it to a 4.51. They claimed I ran a 4.47. And a 4.5. Let me rephrase this. They claimed I ran a 4.46 and a 4.57. So they took the average of the two to a 4.51. And that's what stuck with me. I was a little annoyed because I obviously believe the 4.46 part. I'm not sure how on earth they got me at a 4.57. So I was annoyed at that time. I thought that was a bit slow. But I knew I'd be right around the
wagon coming down the field,
ripping.
Man. 6'5", 255, running 4.46. Woo!
Yeah. Again, you can find that article on NFL.com, and most of the things now it says 4.51. But I remember sitting there, and I talked with this combine or this pro day, but it's like that's the amount of intensity. And again, where my dream is, this isn't going to happen overnight. But it's like if you start creating this narrative that the CFL is as prestigious as it should be, for Canadian kids, and you're building these brands and you're building these players. Now, all of a sudden, at the age of 10, like I did, like 11, you're watching the combine. You're like, man, what is it going to take for me to get into the CFL? And the intensity level of when you get to the CFL combine should be that. And part of what adds into that intensity is I couldn't go back to school. I mean, I could go back to school and learn. But when you declare for the NFL draft, there's no like, oh, yeah, if this doesn't work out, I can go play at Rice again. Like, to me, again, it devalues the CFL to a degree where it's like, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but right now, guys can get drafted and then go play 2 more years of university football.
Yep, you can finish your eligibility.
Why isn't it that it's like, okay, we get on this combine. If I'm going to the combine, I'm committed to this league. I'm committed to playing ball here. And this is going to be the next, if I'm healthy, 10 years of my life, hopefully. Like, to me, there's a level of the combine and then even the draft where it gets very strange. And the next thing is the negotiation list. Justin, you can explain to me, like, what is the point of having a negotiation list?
It's essentially a way to, people would tell you in the league, control salaries, but also for teams to have their guys on their list that nobody else can touch. But there are instances where illegal workouts have happened. I may or may not have reported that about Johnny Manziel. People can go check that out online. But yeah, I think the negotiation list is a way to keep salaries down.
Which, how is that helping the league? How is that helping? Like, how does that help the players? So
It's not at
again,
all.
it's like, man, you want to talk about changing this narrative. Like, let's get a real combine. I'll tell you right now, Mike Goff can run it. That guy's nuts. And I mean that in the best way. I love Mike Goff. Okay? You want entertaining? Yeah. You know Mike. Get Mike up here. Like I say, all hands on deck. Let's put this thing in, like, let's create a narrative where it's like, hey, this draft matters. This draft is no longer, oh, you got picked. You know, okay, you can go back to school for 2 years. If you want to play in the CFL, you're committed to playing in the CFL. Like, and that's where I know that sounds anti-player, but I think that there's some give and take here. Like, I think it's the height of absurdity that guys can get drafted and play 2 more years of university football. And you're going to laugh. You mentioned I got drafted by the Argos. And this is a God's honest truth, Justin. I'm not making this up. I was playing minor league baseball. Okay, you mentioned at the top of the show. So I was in Dunedin, Florida. Okay, and I was playing in the very lowest level. And there was a guy, he was from Windsor, Ontario. He was a great pitcher. He was playing in the Jays, a lot better baseball player than I am. Zach Bro, okay, also went to Villanova. So it was great to have a guy I went to high school with playing minor league baseball, okay? And Zach is like, dude, CFL drafts tonight. And I'm like, yeah, dude, I'm getting picked for sure. I'm getting picked for sure, dude. He's like, okay, I'll be like following. I left, baseball would end at 3. Okay, I left at 3 to drive to Lakewood Ranch to train with Mike Goff, because in my head, I'm going back to play at Rice still. Even though I'm in the minor leagues, I got 1 more year at Rice. I was kind of dipping my toe in the minor leagues vibe. So I go train with Mike Goff, and I'm like looking at my phone, and I'm like, oh man, like the CFL draft's going. Like my phone's gonna ring any minute. I'm like, man, phone didn't ring. Look up online. It might have been on 3DownNation, to be honest with you, because don't you guys publicize who got drafted? Okay.
We do, but the site didn't exist back in 2012. Respect,
okay,
though.
so I don't know where it was. But I sit there and I look up some site, and it's like CFL draft recap. And I go down the list, and I'm like embarrassed. I'm like, oh my God, I've been telling everyone I'm getting drafted in the CFL. Like, I didn't get picked. I then go back to the hotel. Zach Bro's like, dude, congratulations, the Argonauts. I'm like, what are you talking about? You know, like, what? Like, I'm embarrassed to face my buddy. He's like, you got picked by the Argonauts. I'm like, no, I didn't. I Googled the wrong year. I was looking at the 2011 draft list. Okay? An hour after that, I get a call from the Argos being like, hey, buddy, we picked you today in the CFL draft. So we'll see how things go. Like, obviously, you're going back to Rice, and then you got the NFL. That's why you kind of dropped. But, like, we'll if things don't work out, like, we'll be in touch. And again, like, you want, and my point of telling that story is like, you want this thing to be branded. You want this thing to go to the next level. You want people in on it. Think about the draft stories that have occurred in the NFL. I think of Tom Brady right off the top. How much publicity has that got? You know, and I know this guy is on hot water right now, but look at Aaron Rodgers. You know, dropping it was at 27, and like how wild that was. How many years is it? Oh, this guy could have been picked here. This guy could have been picked there. Yada, yada. Oh, there's a big rivalry. Right now, Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels. It's going to live forever. You know, who made the right choice there? And those are moments that could be happening to me, not to the same degree as Caleb and Jaden, that's going to help push this narrative, that's going to scream authenticity, build narratives on DSN, and get more people involved. But instead, it's another missed op for me. And I'll get off the missed op bandwagon here, but that's kind of where I'm at with this thing, Justin, where I'm like, man, this league has a shot right now. But if we overhaul this draft, we overhaul this, We get the union on board and get these numbers going. It's only going to help. Let's get into the grassroots. You said it. The Vanier Cup, and I know there's a bunch of hoops here, but the idea that the Vanier Cup can be played on a Saturday and the Sunday can be the Grey Cup, electric. Absolutely electric. The idea that potentially the Vanier Cup can be aired, it's a Canadian football weekend celebration. If we could get that back on TSN and we do a little publicity on that, drum it up a bit. I mean, I'm not going to lie. I tuned in this year. I wanted to see Mike Folds I watched him as a kid. I heard the rumors about, I always pronounce his last name wrong.
Taylor Elgersma?
Elgersma. Shot him a note on Twitter the other day. I like Mike Folds, never met him, but Greg says a lot about him. I can't stand Laval. I'm an Ontario kid. And that's not a shot Laval. I love Anthony Auclair. Guy's coaching for Laval. One of the most underrated Canadian tight ends of all time. Okay, but there's a rivalry there. We had a Quebec-Ontario matchup. You got a sick QB. You got a historic rivalry with Laval. Obviously Laval's been the best team in Canada for a long time over the years, as much as it pains me to say that. You got an ex-NFLer in Anthony Auclair, who I believe has done a lot of great things in the NFL, coaching or helping coach at Laval. You're talking about branding. I'm like, dude, it's right there. It is right there to drum this up, but we missed the mark. And I think when I say we, I mean myself, I mean you, I mean everyone. TSN, I mean the CFL, we missed the mark. And that was a wild game. I was mad because I wanted Laurier to win. I'm screaming at my TV chip the goddamn end. Vanier's bringing 3 and still getting pressure. I'm like, I need a fucking direct line to my guy Mike Folds right now. That's not. But again, that's where there's a lot of things that I think and I'll kind of end with that, and I'll get off my soapbox, where I really do think the game's moving in the right direction. But if we can keep, as a football community in this country, moving it and maybe giving up some leeway of our quote unquote sacred cows, it's time, man. It's time for football to take over. It's time.
You said it so well in so many ways. Let me just tie up a couple loose ends here, because it makes me think of the 2011 Vanier Cup. Your boy Kyle Quinlan beat Laval in multiple overtimes at BC Place the day before the Grey Cup was played. That game was on TSN, and if I remember the number right, I think it had over 1 million average viewers and peaked even higher. So it's possible. But then what happened was Sportsnet came in, got the Vanier Cup rights, and obviously there's competition there, so they're not on the same weekend. But I think that's a tap-in. You need to have these games on the same weekend. Vanier Cup Saturday in the same stadium where the Grey Cup is going to be played on Sunday. It benefits everybody. It goes back to what you were talking about with the CFL draft. You start to build your stars of tomorrow today when you put them front and center. The CFL Combine and the CFL draft have gotten better back from when you were selected in 2012 and didn't even get a phone call until, sounds like, what was it, the next day?
It was probably 4 or 5 hours after.
So 4 or 5 hours after. Now the kids get called right away. The Combine has improved, but the CFL failed to even live stream their own Combine last year, which to me, I just don't understand. So that's improved. But to your point, there's still a long way to go here. And we could probably talk a long time about this, but I want to get you out on this, Luke, because I know you got to go. Did you ever come close to signing with the Toronto Argonauts? Was that a thought for you at any point in time after you were done playing in the National Football League?
After I was done, no, just because I didn't really retire due to, I had a health scare, and I'm not trying to hide from this. I had a heart thing that I still don't officially know what happened. I know I had this severe pericardial effusion. And it kind of tripped me out a little bit, because I thought I was dying on the ER table, and I had woke up with a pump in my heart or drain. And that was in July. And then I had gotten cleared, believe it or not, and signed back with Seattle for a day, and went to practice, and just was my brain and mind was not in it. And I don't blame it all on the heart thing, but there was a lot of other things that had gone down. That was year 9 for me. I didn't think we were going to be very good. I'm like, I almost died last month. Like, it's maybe time to like not play football for a little bit. And that's kind of like, it wasn't like I never wanted to play in the CFL, but it was more of like where I was mentally at in that period of my life.
Man, are you healthy now and all good?
Healthy. I was cleared to play. It just like that whole episode had a bit of a toll on my mental state, if that makes sense. As far as like playing football and where my personal life was at the time.
It definitely makes a lot of sense, man. We're glad to hear that you're happy now in a much better state overall. And dude, this has been awesome. I love the hype. I love the passion. I love the energy. We need more of this around Canadian football. I don't care if it's CFL, OVFL, OUA, friggin' like my nephew's playing flag football. Like, we just need this passion, man. And everybody needs to get together, put aside some of the egos, and do what's best for football in this country. Because I think you're right. 2025 could not only be the year of the CFL in this country, but let's make it the start of a great era of football in Canada in the future, man. Thank you so much. And I hope we get to do this again at some point down the road.
Justin, thank you for having me.